You're listening to the weekly Parsha Podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in 5778, 2018. This week's Parsha is Parsha's Behaaloscha. I'd like to share with you some ideas or some midrashim that Reb Chaim Friedlander brings, and I'd like to actually give a little bit of a different twist to what he speaks about and focus in on a few very interesting points that are remarkable. So Reb Chaim Friedlander, he hones in on the story of the Misainim. The Jewish people, they were in the Midbar, they were in the wilderness, and the food that they were eating at the time was the man, the special food, the special manna, which would fall from the heaven, and it, as Chazal, as the sages tell us, it had a taste that included all tastes. If a person was righteous, he'd be able to taste whatever taste he wished to, if he would think about a taste, he would be able to taste any taste with the manna. And so the Jewish people, however, especially the Asafsuf, which were the Erev Rav, so they complained. There was a complaint that they had that they wanted to have meat. The Torah describes this complaint, and because of the fact that they made this complaint, Moshe Rabbeinu, it's very interesting. The Torah tells us that Moshe felt weakened. He felt like he couldn't carry the Jewish people anymore. There was just too much for him. And the reason that this is remarkable, as Reb Chaim Friedlander points out, is because when it came to the Chet HaEgel, when it came to the sin of the golden calf, Moshe Rabbeinu fought on behalf of the Jewish people. He said to God, don't destroy them as you wish to. But when it came to this sin, when they complained about the fact that they didn't have meat, Moshe Rabbeinu lost his power. He wasn't able to fight. The question is why? Also very interesting, as we read the story, which also needs an explanation, is that during this occasion, during this complaint, so Moshe Rabbeinu was instructed by Hashem, was instructed by God, to appoint 70 elders. And they would help him with the Jewish people, with the complaints of the Jewish people. And the question is, there were 70 elders from before. What happened to them? Why at this point were new elders needed to be appointed? Where were the elders that had been helping out before? Where had they gone? So there's a few very interesting and remarkable points that go on here, and I'd like to share them with you. So first of all, I just want to read it inside. First of all, what happened to the original Zakanim? What happened to the original 70 elders? So the Medrash tells us a remarkable thing, an unbelievable thing. It says, Asvali, Hashem instructed Moshe Rabbeinu to gather in these 70 new elders. This is a response to your complaint, Moshe. He said, I can't do it by myself. The Medrash says, where were the original 70 elders? They were in Egypt. They had been there and they had gone out. We find that Moshe Rabbeinu was instructed to gather together the elders of Israel when he went to Pharaoh. Medrash says an amazing thing, that they died, the Zakanim died at this time, during this complaint. They died in fire. Really, they should have died, a very similar thing to what happened with Nadav and Avihu. They should have died originally at Mount Sinai. Why? They saw godliness, but they had lightheadedness. They were eating and drinking, the verse tells us. They had an inappropriate behavior at Mount Sinai. They should not have been eating at that time. Hashem did not want there should be an avelus, that there should be a sadness that great sages were dying. Nadav and Avihu didn't die then, they only died later. And the Zakanim also didn't die then, rather they died at this point. So Reb Chaim Friedlander says that at this point was why. So we need to understand, as he says, and I want to give a little bit of a different twist on it, but we need to understand why is it that the Zakanim died at this point, when the Jewish people started to complain about the man. Why, Nadav and Avihu, they did something, it makes sense why they died. They brought an Eish Zara, a strange fire, into the Mishkan, to the tabernacle, so that they did something wrong. Why at this point did the Zakanim die? As a result of the sin of the Jewish people, of their complaint. Okay? And now, interestingly, who were the new appointees to be the Shivim Zakanim? Who were the new 70 people who would indeed become in their place? The Medrash continues and says, very interesting. Hashem says, I'm going to come down, I'm going to speak. He uses a language of Yerida, which is coming down, just like it says by Mount Sinai. At Har Sinai, God comes down onto the mountain in order to speak to the Jewish people. So too over here, God came down when He appointed these 70 Zakanim, these 70 new elders. That this day was was beloved to God, just like the day that the Torah was given. Okay, so too the same thing over here. So he says that this is the idea of the Torah being lowered down into this world. The idea of the Torah being lowered down into this world. And what's remarkable here, in considering the number 70, it's important to understand what is the number 70. Why are there 70 elders? Why are there 70 nations? Why are there 70 offspring of Jacob, of Yaakov Avinu? It says he came down with 70 offspring. By Yered, he came down, right? What is the idea? The idea is that there's a koilo. There are 70 nations. The Jewish people are the one nation that incorporates or includes all of the 70 nations. The Torah has 70 facets. There are 70 ways of understanding or interpreting the Torah. And there's one Torah, but when it comes down into this world, so there are 70 different ways of understanding the Torah, or different directions of looking at the Torah. There's, we have a two-dimensional, we have two eyes. Each one of them sees in two dimensions. When you put the two perspectives together, you get a three-dimensional, you have depth perception. So too, there are 70 dimensions of the Torah. There's an incredible depth, which we can't see in this world, becomes flattened. Each person can only see one dimension of that. We have to put together all of the perceptions in order to understand the deeper meaning of what's going on. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one he's the soul that includes all of the Jewish people. He's the soul that includes all of the 70 Zakanim, the 70 elders. And the elders in turn include all of the souls of those who they are meant to be the leaders for. So you have this dual aspect that they're included in Moshe. Moshe includes them, and they in turn include all those who are part of the Jewish people. The Jewish people are that one nation that includes all of the 70 nations. Okay, so that's the general concept of the number 70. And there's a certain simcha, a joy, when we get a new version of the 70. But what is the difference? Very interesting. What is the difference between the 70 Zakanim, the 70 elders who died, versus the 70 elders who replaced them? So Reb Chaim Friedlander brings a very interesting difference. The 70 elders who lost their lives at this point, these 70 elders, so when Moshe brought them, he was commanded by Hashem, he was commanded by God to gather together these 70 elders to go into Pharaoh and ask Pharaoh to let the Jewish people go. So the verse tells us that he gathered them together, they started to go, but as Moshe Rabbeinu gets there, the Torah just says that he and Aaron walked into Pharaoh. What happened to the 70 elders? Where did they go? They weren't brave enough, they didn't have the courage to enter into Pharaoh and to represent the Jewish people there. What's the difference between those Zakanim and the new Shivim Zakanim? Who are the new Shivim Zakanim, the new 70 elders? These new ones were the taskmasters who were in charge of, they had been appointed over the Jewish people, and they were meant to beat the Jewish people in order that they should work. However, instead of beating the Jewish people, they refused to beat the Jewish people, and they instead received blows themselves because they weren't beating the Jewish people. And so the difference we see very clearly between the previous Zakanim, the previous 70, and the new 70, was that the old group was not able to properly stand up for the Jewish people. They were not able to properly represent the Jewish people in front of Pharaoh. When the going got tough, they got going. They didn't walk in. They were afraid. But for the new Zakanim, when the going got tough, these Zakanim were able to stand up for the Jewish people. That's the difference. Now, the question that we asked before was, what was the reason why these Zakanim passed on from the world at this point? What was the mistake that they made? So first mistake we see, as we just said, is that they weren't ready to stand up for the Jewish people. But there was another mistake that they made, which was that when it came to Har Sinai, when it came to Mount Sinai, they were in a place, they were in a spiritual place. They saw God. They saw godliness, they saw an incredible revelation of godliness. But what did they do? So now, what's clear, and this is already some thoughts that I was having as I contemplated these ideas, what's clear is that the mistake that they made paralleled the mistake of the Jewish people. How so? How does that work? It's important to understand that whoever's on top, if the Jewish people, for example, we are the nation which encompasses, is the Koilel, which includes all the 70 nations. When we do something wrong, so it has a ripple effect in the nations of the world. When we do something right, when we're following God's Torah, when we're following the paths of spirituality, so then it has a ripple effect on the nations as well. And you can see this on a physical level, just simply, the country of Israel, much of the technology which comes out of Israel is used throughout the world. Waze, for example, is Jewish technology, Israeli technology. But that's just a simple physical example on the physical plane, how the things that the Jewish people does, those things that we do, affect and ripple out into all of the nations of the world. But this is true on a spiritual level as well. The things that we do, depending on our commitment to God, our commitment to godliness, to spirituality, that has a ripple effect on the world. And if we are not committed, if we lack that commitment, it also ripples out. This is also true when it comes to the Zikanim, the elders, who they were in charge and leaders over the Jewish people. So when they had a chisar, when they had a lack, when there was something wrong with their service of God, there was a ripple effect on the Jewish people. And it manifested on those who were beneath them, so to speak, on the spiritual totem pole. And that was the necessity here for them to be replaced. So let's look at this. Let's see what the mistake was of the elders. They were in a place of spirituality. When Moshe Rabbeinu was on Har Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights, it says that he didn't eat and he didn't drink. Because why? Because when you're in a place of spirituality, when you're in the realm of the malachim, when you're in the realm of the angels, so you have to, let go of the physicality. We do that every single year on Yom Kippur. We don't eat, we don't drink. All of the Chamisha Inuyim, the 5 ways that we afflict ourselves, represent the fact that on Yom Kippur we are on a higher spiritual level. Because of the fact that we're on a higher spiritual level, we don't eat, we don't drink. It's not just because, it's not like Tisha B'Av when we don't eat and drink because we are sad, we have Avelus, we're in mourning over the destruction of the temple. Yom Kippur is a day when we are on a higher spiritual level, so we don't eat and we don't drink. The Zikanim they entered into this lofty realm. They entered into the place of the Shekhinah. They entered into the place of the divine presence. They saw godliness. They saw spirituality. It was openly manifest to them. And they made a mistake. They ate and they drank where it was inappropriate. They brought the spirituality down in an inappropriate way. Of course, we know that Yiddishkeit, the Judaism teaches that we're obligated to infuse our eating and drinking with spirituality. On Shabbos, how do we celebrate Shabbos? Every 7 days we have a ton of eating, a ton of drinking. How do we celebrate a wedding? With eating and drinking. Sudas mitzvah. But that's appropriate when it's appropriate. The problem the Zikanim had was that they were not meant to eat and they were not meant to drink. There's a time and a place. They made that mistake. They did eat and they did drink when they were on the mountain. When they were experiencing that spirituality, it was like Yom Kippur. They should not have been eating and they should not have been drinking. So when they were in that awesome place, in that high spiritual place, they brought it down in an inappropriate way. In a parallel way, the complaint of the Jewish people. What was the complaint of the Jewish people? They said, we remember the avatiach, the kishuim. We remember what it was like in Egypt. We remember that taste, that delicious taste of the watermelons and the gourds that we used to eat when we were in Egypt. So the Meforshim discuss, and Reb Chaim Friedlander brings down, well, what do you mean? The man had any taste you wanted it to taste. But no, it didn't have this taste. Why? Because God made it that the man could not have that taste. Why? Because eating gourds and eating watermelon was not good for the women who were nursing. It was not good. It would cause the babies to have gas or whatever it was. The man couldn't have that taste. When the Jewish people complained that it didn't have the taste that they wanted meat. What they were really saying is, we want the man, which is this spiritual bread, which can have any taste. It's all inclusive. We want it to come down the way we want it to come down. We want to be able to access that spiritual bread in a physical way, the way we want. That was the same mistake, almost the same exact mistake as the Zakanim. So when they complained about this issue, what they were really doing is they were manifesting the mistake that the Gedal, the Shivim Zakanim, had made on Mount Sinai. The same mistake, but on a lower level, on their level, on the level of those who were beneath the Shivim Zakanim. What that did was that there's a resonance that happens when, let's say, if a person has children, so the children behave based on the way that they see their parents behave. So if the children are doing a certain thing wrong, it's a reflection on the parents, right? So if a child does a certain negative act, so it brings up a taina, a complaint against the parents. That's natural. That's how it is. And in the same way here, the Shivim Zakanim were the spiritual parents of the Jewish people. So when they complained, it brought up a complaint on their spiritual parents, the Shivim Zakanim. And the result was that the Shivim Zakanim were called to task for the mistake that they had made at Mount Sinai, which manifested now as a mistake that the Jewish people themselves made. But it required a new set of Shivim Zakanim. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I don't have any more the support system that I need. I don't have these people underneath me who can help me to properly channel the spiritual power that's coming from you, Hashem, from you, God, down through me into the Shivim Zakanim and then into the entire Jewish people. We need a new set. Who are the people who had the responsibility, who recognized that those beneath them are part of them? The Shivim Zakanim from before didn't recognize the effects that they had. They didn't have the sense of responsibility to walk into Pharaoh, to sacrifice on behalf of their constituents, on behalf of the Jewish people. But there was a different set of people, of 70 people, who did have that courage to stand up and take a beating themselves on behalf of the Jewish people. They recognized their responsibility to those beneath them. And therefore, because they had that ability and they had stood up for the Jewish people in the past, they were now going to be appointed to be the Shivim Zakanim, the new Shivim Zakanim, who would experience the nevuah, the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu would come onto them, come through them, and it would then spread onto the entire Jewish people and aid them in serving God appropriately, in recognizing the power of the spirituality that was being given to them, and not to complain about the fact that the man didn't taste exactly the way they wanted it. Well, we want meat. These complaints were a result of something spiritual higher up on the ladder that now was lost and replaced by a much more powerful spirituality of the new Shivim Zakanim, who had the courage and had the responsibility, the sense of responsibility on behalf of the Jewish people. And now, therefore, could properly represent the Jewish people in bringing down the shefa, God's influx into the world and into the Jewish people. So now, I want to bless you and I ask you to bless me. I think that what we see here is a powerful lesson for each and every one of us, because we all have a certain level of responsibility, whether we're a parent or whether we're in a situation socially where we affect others. Each and every one of us is like the Shivim Zakanim, and either we can stand up and recognize with courage the responsibility that we have, or we can neglect those who are beneath us and not be that proper example per se, heaven forbid. So I want to bless you and ask you to bless me. Hashem should help us to recognize all of our responsibilities, recognize the effect that we have on all of those around us, whether it's our offspring, our children, or whether it's those in our vicinity, our friends. Hashem should help us to recognize who we are and the effect that we have on others. Hashem should help us to be like the second set of Shivim Zakanim, like the second set of the elders who were able to have that prophecy, were able to stand up and with courage on behalf of their brethren. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos.